The afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Riverside Diner, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. It was that quiet time between lunch and dinner when the restaurant felt almost peaceful. Only a handful of tables were occupied, mostly by people nursing coffee or catching up on paperwork. In the corner booth sat a 16-year-old boy named Jordan. He wore his school uniform neatly, a navy blazer with the academy crest on the pocket. His backpack rested beside him, stuffed with textbooks and notebooks covered in chemistry formulas. He'd ordered a lemonade and was waiting patiently for his mother to arrive. She'd sent him a text 20 minutes ago saying she was wrapping up at work and would meet him there. Jordan had his earbuds in, but the music was low. He was flipping through his chemistry notes, occasionally scribbling something in the margins. There was a big test coming up and he wanted to use every spare minute to prepare. His mom always told him that preparation was the key to success, and he'd taken that lesson to heart. At the booth right next to him sat a woman in her late 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive-looking clothes. Her name was Linda, and she sat across from her teenage daughter, Ashley. They'd just finished their meal and Linda was scrolling through her phone while Ashley picked at the remains of her dessert. Linda glanced over at Jordan, and her expression changed. She leaned across the table toward her daughter and said something in a voice that wasn't quite a whisper. It was that particular volume people use when they want to be overheard but maintain deniability about it. "I don't know what this place is coming to," Linda said, loud enough that Jordan could hear her clearly. "You used to be able to come to a nice restaurant without certain elements taking over." Ashley shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting toward Jordan and then back to her plate. She mumbled something that might have been agreement, but it was hard to tell. Jordan tried to ignore it. He'd been in situations like this before, more times than he cared to count. His mom had taught him to keep his dignity, to not let other people's ignorance pull him down to their level. He turned up his music slightly and focused harder on his notes. But Linda wasn't finished. She seemed emboldened by her daughter's lack of objection. "I mean, look at him," she continued, gesturing vaguely in Jordan's direction without looking at him directly. "Just sitting there taking up space. Probably can't even afford anything on the menu." Jordan felt his jaw tighten. He kept his eyes on his textbook, but the words were starting to blur. His heart was beating faster now, that familiar mixture of anger and hurt rising in his chest. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but what would be the point? People like this never listened anyway. "Mom," Ashley said quietly, a note of warning in her voice. But it was barely audible, and Linda either didn't hear or didn't care. A young waiter named Chris was refilling water glasses at a nearby table. He glanced over at Linda's booth, clearly having heard her comments. His face showed discomfort, but he didn't say anything. He was probably in his early 20s, working his way through college, and confrontation with customers wasn't something he was eager to invite. Jordan finally pulled out one earbud and turned slightly toward Linda's table. His voice was calm and polite, the way his parents had always taught him to speak. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I'm trying to study. Would you mind keeping your voice down?" Linda's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe he'd had the audacity to speak to her. She set down her phone and turned to face him fully, her expression a mixture of shock and indignation. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice rising. "Are you talking to me?" "I just asked if you could speak a little quieter," Jordan replied, still maintaining his composure. "I have a test to study for." Linda's face flushed red. She looked around the restaurant as if gathering witnesses to this great offense. "I will speak at whatever volume I choose in a public establishment," she declared. "And I don't appreciate being told what to do by someone who probably shouldn't even be here in the first place." The restaurant had gone quiet now. Other diners were looking over, some with curiosity, others with concern. An older couple in the corner exchanged troubled glances. A businessman at the counter stopped mid-bite of his sandwich. Linda raised her hand and snapped her fingers at Chris, who was still hovering nearby with his water pitcher. "You," she called out. "Come here. I need to speak with you." Chris approached reluctantly, the pitcher still in his hand. "Yes, ma'am? Is everything okay with your meal?" "The meal was fine," Linda said impatiently. "But I want you to remove this person from the restaurant. He's loitering and making me very uncomfortable." Chris looked at Jordan, then back at Linda. "Ma'am, he's a customer. He ordered a drink and he's waiting for someone." "I don't care what he ordered," Linda snapped. "Look at him. Does he look like he belongs in a place like this? He's probably waiting to steal something or cause trouble." I want him removed immediately or I'm calling the police. Jordan felt his stomach drop. This was escalating beyond anything he'd experienced before. His hands were shaking slightly as he gripped the edge of his textbook. He wanted to call his mom, but his phone was in his backpack and reaching for it now might be misinterpreted. "Ma'am, I really don't think," Chris began, but Linda cut him off. "I don't care what you think," she said sharply. "Get your manager. Now. And if you don't do something about this situation, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of establishment this is. Do you understand me?" Ashley was staring down at her plate, her face bright red. "Mom, maybe we should just go," she said quietly. "Absolutely not," Linda replied. "I have every right to feel safe when I'm dining out. I'm not going to be intimidated in a public place." Chris set down his water pitcher and walked quickly toward the kitchen, presumably to get the manager. Several other diners had pulled out their phones, some openly filming the interaction. The businessman at the counter shook his head in disgust but didn't intervene. Jordan gathered his books and papers, preparing to leave before this got any worse. He didn't want trouble. He just wanted to wait for his mom in peace and maybe get something to eat. His throat felt tight and he was fighting back the stinging sensation in his eyes. He wouldn't cry, not here. Not in front of these people. Linda watched him gather his things with a satisfied expression, as if his movement to leave proved her point. "See," she said to no one in particular. "He knows he doesn't belong here." A moment later, a tired-looking man in his 50s emerged from the back of the restaurant. He wore a manager's badge that read Robert Peterson. He approached Linda's table first, his expression already apologetic. "Ma'am, I understand there's been some concern," he began, and Jordan's heart sank even further. He could already tell how this was going to go. His mother couldn't arrive soon enough. Robert Peterson had been managing Riverside Diner for almost 8 years, and in that time, he'd handled his share of difficult situations, but this one made his stomach turn. He could see the young man in the school uniform gathering his books with trembling hands. He could see Linda's self-righteous expression. And he knew exactly what was happening here. But Robert also knew that Linda was a regular customer. She came in twice a week, always ordered the same thing, and always tipped well. She had friends in the local business community. One bad review from her could spread like wildfire, and the owner had already warned him about keeping the Yelp ratings up. So Robert did what he'd later regret for the rest of his life. He took the coward's way out. "Young man," Robert said, approaching Jordan's booth with what he hoped was a kind expression. "I'm sorry about this confusion, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting outside? Just until your party arrives?" Jordan looked up at him with eyes that held both hurt and disbelief. "I'm a paying customer," he said quietly. "I ordered a drink. I haven't done anything wrong." I know," Robert said, his voice taking on that placating tone people use when they're trying to smooth things over. "But we want all our customers to feel comfortable, and if we could just—" "What about me feeling comfortable?" Jordan interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. "Does that matter at all?" Robert shifted his weight from foot to foot, avoiding Jordan's gaze. "It's just until your mother arrives. Then you can both come in and have a proper meal. How about I give you a discount to make up for the inconvenience?" The offer hung in the air like something rotten. Jordan stared at the manager for a long moment, and in that look was a depth of disappointment that made Robert want to disappear into the floor. But he didn't take the words back. At the corner table, an elderly man named Walter set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. His wife Dorothy put a hand on his arm, but he shook his head. Walter had lived through the civil rights movement. He'd seen this kind of thing before, and he'd promised himself he'd never be a silent bystander again. "Now hold on just a minute," Walter said, his voice strong despite his 78 years. "That young man hasn't done a single thing wrong. He's been sitting there studying, minding his own business." "This is disgraceful." Linda whipped around to face Walter, her eyes flashing. "Excuse me, but this is none of your concern. I have every right to feel safe in a public establishment." "Safe from what exactly?" Dorothy chimed in, her voice sharp with decades of teaching experience. "A child doing his homework?" "He's not a child," Linda shot back. "And I don't have to explain myself to you or anyone else. This is a free country, and if I feel uncomfortable, I have the right to say something about it." Ashley had slumped down in her seat, wishing she could disappear. She pulled out her phone, probably texting a friend about how mortifying this was. But still she said nothing in Jordan's defense. Chris, the waiter, stood off to the side, his water pitcher forgotten on a nearby table. He was wrestling with his own conscience. He needed this job. His tuition was due next month, and he'd already taken out more loans than he was comfortable with. But watching this unfold made him feel sick to his stomach. Linda wasn't finished. With the manager seemingly on her side, she felt empowered to continue. "I mean, let's be honest here," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. "Look at where we are. This is a nice establishment in a good neighborhood. Places like this aren't meant for just anybody who wanders in off the street." "I didn't wander in," Jordan said, his voice stronger now despite the tears threatening to spill. "I come here with my mom once a month. We always sit in this same booth. I know Chris by name. I know the menu by heart." But Linda was on a roll now, feeding off the attention and the manager's implicit support. "Let me guess," she said with a cruel smile. "Your mother is probably some kind of professional, right?" "That's what they all say. Let me guess what kind of professional." She made air quotes around the word professional, her implication clear and ugly. "My mother is," Jordan began, but Linda cut him off. "A cleaning lady? Maybe she works at one of those nail salons? Or let me guess, she's a secretary somewhere, and she's been telling you she's something more important?" Linda laughed, a harsh sound that made several people wince. "Honey, people like you always make up stories about yourselves. It's sad, really." That was the moment Jordan's composure finally broke. Not into anger, but into something worse. Visible hurt. A single tear rolled down his cheek and he quickly wiped it away, but everyone had seen it. He shoved his notebooks into his backpack with shaking hands. "She's not coming anyway," Linda continued, oblivious or uncaring about the damage she was doing. "They never do. You're probably here trying to get free food or sympathy from someone. I've seen it 100 times. That's enough," Walter said, standing up from his table. His voice thundered across the restaurant. "Lady, I fought in Vietnam. I've seen real danger, and I can tell you right now the only threatening thing in this restaurant is your ignorance and hatred." Linda's face turned even redder. "How dare you? I am a respected member of this community. I volunteer at the library. I organize the neighborhood watch. I'm not a racist. I just believe in standards and safety." "Standards?" Dorothy repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Other diners were openly recording now. One woman, a young professional named Keisha who'd been working on her laptop, had already tweeted about what was happening. A teenage boy at another table was live streaming it. The businessman at the counter had his phone out too, documenting everything. Robert knew this was getting out of hand, but he felt paralyzed. Whatever he did now would be wrong. If he kicked Linda out, she'd make his life hell. If he kept supporting her, these videos would go viral and destroy the restaurant's reputation. He stood there frozen in his own cowardice, wringing his hands. Jordan was almost packed up now. His backpack was zipped, his jacket was on. He left a $5 bill on the table for his lemonade, even though he'd barely touched it. He wouldn't give them any excuse to say he'd tried to leave without paying. "I'm sorry," Chris said quietly as Jordan stood to leave. He said it so softly that maybe only Jordan heard it. Jordan nodded at him but didn't speak. What could he say? That it was okay? It wasn't okay. That he understood? He didn't understand how people could be so cruel for no reason. Linda watched him prepare to leave with a triumphant expression. "See?" she said to the restaurant at large. "Problem solved. Maybe next time he'll think twice about where he belongs." Jordan was almost to the door, his vision blurred with tears he was too proud to let fall in front of these people. His hand was on the door handle. Behind him, he could hear Linda still talking, still justifying herself to anyone who would listen. That's when the door swung open from the outside, and Jordan's mother walked in. Judge Patricia Thompson stood in the doorway of Riverside Diner, still wearing her black judicial robe. She'd come straight from court, where she'd just sentenced a man to 15 years for embezzlement. The robe was part of her daily uniform, representing the authority of the law and the weight of justice she carried. She looked imposing and powerful, every inch the respected jurist she'd worked so hard to become, and she was looking for her son. The smile that had been forming on her face as she entered faded the instant she took in the scene. Her son, clearly distressed, standing by the door with his backpack on. A restaurant full of uncomfortable-looking people. A blonde woman mid-sentence with a self-satisfied expression, a manager wringing his hands, and phones, so many phones, all recording. Patricia's judicial training kicked in immediately. She could read a scene like this in seconds, assess what had happened, understand the dynamics at play. Her eyes found Jordan's, and in that moment, he felt the first sense of relief he'd had since this nightmare began. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke on the word. Patricia walked into the restaurant with the kind of presence that couldn't be ignored. She'd developed it over years on the bench, that ability to command a room simply by entering it. But right now she wasn't thinking about commanding anything. She was thinking about her son and the look on his face. She moved toward Jordan, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. She didn't say anything at first, just looked into his eyes with a question that only a mother could ask without words. "Are you okay?" Jordan nodded, but they both knew it was a lie. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw was tight, and his hands were still shaking slightly. Patricia had seen enough witnesses on the stand to know when someone was holding back tears through sheer force of will. She looked around the restaurant, her trained eyes taking in every detail. The elderly couple watching with concern, the nervous waiter hovering nearby, the manager who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor, and the blonde woman in the booth next to where Jordan had been sitting, whose face had gone completely white. Linda was staring at Patricia's robe with an expression of dawning horror. The black judicial robe was unmistakable, especially to anyone who'd ever been to court or seen a judge on television. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her like a wave, and she seemed to be choking on words that wouldn't come. Patricia's voice, when she finally spoke, was calm. It was the same voice she used in her courtroom, the one that could make lawyers stop mid-sentence and defendants reconsider their testimony. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made everyone in the restaurant stop what they were doing. "Would someone like to tell me what's been happening here?" she asked, her hand still on Jordan's shoulder. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert, the manager, opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. Chris, the waiter, looked down at his shoes. Ashley, Linda's daughter, had her face buried in her hands. It was Walter, the elderly man from the corner, who finally spoke up. "Ma'am, I'd be happy to tell you. Your son has been sitting here quietly studying, waiting for you to arrive. He ordered a drink and was minding his own business. That woman there," he pointed at Linda, "started making comments about him, racist comments, loud ones. When your son politely asked her to keep it down, she demanded he be removed from the restaurant." Patricia's expression didn't change, but her eyes grew colder. "I see. And did anyone try to remove my son from the restaurant?" Walter gestured toward Robert. The manager suggested he might be more comfortable waiting outside. Patricia turned her gaze to Robert, who seemed to physically shrink under the weight of it. "Is that true, sir? You asked my son to leave?" I didn't. I mean, it wasn't," Robert stammered, his face flushed red. "I was just trying to keep all the customers comfortable. I offered him a discount." "A discount," Patricia repeated, her tone making it clear exactly what she thought of that offer. "My son is a paying customer who was doing nothing but studying while waiting for his mother, and you offered him a discount to leave because another customer was uncomfortable with his presence. Do I have that right?" Robert said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Patricia looked at Linda, who was now trembling visibly. "And you? I'd like to hear from you. What exactly did my son do that made you so uncomfortable?" Linda's mouth opened and closed several times. This is all a misunderstanding," she finally managed to say. "I never said. I didn't mean. Please don't insult my intelligence or waste my time," Patricia said, her voice still perfectly calm. "I've been a judge for 12 years. I know when someone is lying, and I know when someone is trying to backtrack from something they absolutely meant in the moment. So I'll ask you again, what did my son do?" "Nothing," Linda whispered so quietly that people had to strain to hear it. "He didn't do anything. That's right. He didn't do anything," Patricia said, "except exist in a space where you decided he didn't belong, and you felt entitled enough to not only voice that opinion, but to try to have him forcibly removed." Dorothy, Walter's wife, spoke up from their corner table. She said some terrible things, "Your Honor, about your son and about you too, though she didn't know who you were at the time." Patricia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "What did she say about me?" There was an uncomfortable pause. No one wanted to repeat Linda's cruel words. Finally, Keisha, the young woman who'd been working on her laptop, spoke up. She implied that you were... She made assumptions about what kind of work you did. She suggested you were a cleaning lady or worked in a nail salon. She said people like you and your son always make up stories about being more than what you are. The restaurant fell silent again. Several people were still recording. Their phones held steady, documenting everything. This was the kind of moment that would be shared and reshared, dissected and discussed for days or weeks to come. Patricia took a deep breath. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but somehow that made it even more powerful. My son Jordan is 16 years old. He maintains a 4.0 GPA at one of the most competitive schools in this state. He volunteers at the community food bank every Saturday morning. He tutors younger kids in math and science twice a week. He's never been in trouble a day in his life. He wants to be an aerospace engineer and design systems for space exploration. She paused, looking around the restaurant at all the faces watching her. But here's the thing. I shouldn't have to tell you any of that. His accomplishments, his dreams, his character, none of that should matter. He deserved to be treated with basic human dignity, simply because he's a human being. That's it. That's the only qualification required. Linda was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of embarrassment and fear. Tears of someone who'd been caught and exposed, whose comfortable life was suddenly very uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Linda choked out. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know I was a judge, Patricia interrupted. That's what you mean, isn't it? You didn't know my son had a mother in a position of authority. So let me ask you this. If I were a cleaning lady, would that have made your behavior acceptable? If I did work in a nail salon, would that have given you the right to treat my child the way you did? Linda had no answer to that because they both knew the truth. She was only sorry because she'd been caught, because the person she'd insulted turned out to be someone who could make her feel small. If Jordan's mother had been exactly who Linda assumed she was, Linda wouldn't have felt an ounce of regret. Patricia turned to Robert. And you. You saw what was happening and you chose comfort over courage. You chose not to rock the boat over doing what was right. That's a failure, sir. Not just as a manager, but as a human being. Robert's voice was barely audible. I know, you're right. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't undo what happened here, Patricia said. Sorry doesn't erase the humiliation my son felt, or the message you sent him about his worth in this world. But if you mean it, you'll prove it with your actions going forward. You'll implement real policies to make sure this never happens again. You'll train your staff to stand up for what's right instead of what's comfortable. You'll make this establishment a place where every person is treated with equal dignity and respect. Chris, the young waiter, had tears in his eyes. Your Honor, he said quietly, I'm sorry too. I should have done more. I should have spoken up stronger. Patricia's expression softened slightly as she looked at him. You're young, and you were put in an impossible position. But you remember this moment. Remember how it felt to watch injustice happen and feel powerless to stop it. And next time, be braver. Ashley, Linda's daughter, finally spoke up. Her voice was shaking but clear. My mom was wrong. What she said was horrible. I should have said something. I'm ashamed that I didn't. It was the first genuinely remorseful thing anyone had said, and Patricia acknowledged it with a small nod. Then learn from this. Be better than what you witnessed today. Patricia gently squeezed Jordan's shoulder and looked down at him. Are you hungry, sweetheart? Jordan looked surprised by the question. Yeah, I guess so. Then let's sit down and have lunch, Patricia said simply. We came here to eat together, and that's what we're going to do. Patricia guided Jordan back to the booth where he'd been sitting before everything had gone wrong. His textbooks and papers were still scattered on the table, evidence of the peaceful afternoon that had been shattered. She helped him organize them back into a neat stack, her movements calm and deliberate, as if they were the only two people in the restaurant. But they weren't alone, and everyone knew it. Every eye in the place was on them. Some people looked guilty, others sympathetic, and a few simply curious to see what would happen next. The phones were still out, still recording, documenting this moment for the world to see. Linda remained frozen in her booth, her daughter beside her. Ashley was pulling at her mother's arm, whispering urgently that they should leave, but Linda seemed unable to move. She sat there like a statue, her face pale, watching Patricia and Jordan with an expression that mixed fear with something else. Maybe shame, Maybe the dawning realization of what she'd done, or maybe just terror at the potential consequences. Chris approached their table with hesitant steps, his order pad clutched in his hand like a shield. "Your Honor, what can I get for you and your son?" Patricia smiled at him, and it was genuine. "Thank you, Chris. I'll have the grilled chicken salad with the vinaigrette on the side." "Jordan, what would you like, honey?" Jordan stared at the menu without really seeing it. His mind was still racing, replaying everything that had happened. His mother's hand found his across the table, warm and steady. "Take your time," she said softly. After a moment, Jordan's voice came out stronger than he expected. "I'll have the turkey club and a chocolate milkshake." "Excellent choice," Chris said, writing it down with visible relief. "I'll put that in right away. And your meals are on the house today. Both of them." Patricia shook her head. "That's not necessary, Chris. We'll pay for our food like any other customers." "Please," Chris said, and there was real emotion in his voice. "It's the least we can do. The absolute least." Patricia studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Thank you." As Chris hurried away, Robert, the manager, approached the table. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 15 minutes. His hands were clasped in front of him, almost like he was praying. "Your Honor, I want you to know that I'm implementing new policies immediately. We're going to have mandatory training for all staff on dignity and respect. I'm going to create a clear anti-discrimination policy and post it where everyone can see it. This will never happen again in my restaurant." "I swear it." Patricia looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Peterson, is it?" "Yes, ma'am. Robert Peterson." "Mr. Peterson, I appreciate your words, but words are easy. It's the follow-through that matters. I hope you mean what you're saying, because if you don't, someone else will end up sitting where my son is sitting right now, feeling exactly what he felt today. And that would be a shame, because you have a chance to be better. Don't waste it." "I won't, Your Honor. I promise I won't." Robert's voice cracked slightly. "I have kids of my own. If someone treated them the way—" "I'm just so sorry." Patricia didn't respond to that, and after a moment, Robert walked away. His shoulders slumped with the weight of his failure. At the corner table, Walter and Dorothy were gathering their things to leave. But before they did, Walter came over to Patricia and Jordan's booth. He extended his weathered hand to Jordan first. "Young man, you handled yourself with more grace and dignity than most adults I know. Your mama raised you right. Don't you ever forget your worth, you hear me?" Jordan shook his hand, and for the first time since his mother arrived, a small smile appeared on his face. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for speaking up." "That's what we're supposed to do," Walter said firmly. "When we see wrong, we speak up. That's not heroic. That's just being human." He turned to Patricia. "Your Honor, you raised a fine young man. This world needs more people like him." Patricia's eyes glistened slightly. "Thank you. And thank you for standing up when it mattered." Dorothy squeezed Jordan's shoulder gently as they left. "You keep being wonderful, sweetheart." After they'd gone, it was just Patricia and Jordan at the booth, finally able to have a real moment together. The other diners had started returning to their own conversations, though several people smiled supportively at them as they passed. "Mom," Jordan said quietly, "can we talk about what happened?" "Of course we can, baby. That's why we're sitting here." Jordan fiddled with the straw wrapper from his earlier lemonade. "I've had stuff like this happen before. Little things, you know. Like teachers assuming I'm not in the honors classes or security guards following me in stores. But this was different. She was so mean, Mom, and she didn't even know me." Patricia nodded, letting him talk. And the worst part wasn't even what she said. It was that the manager believed her. "He was going to make me leave. I didn't do anything wrong, and he was still going to kick me out just because she felt uncomfortable." Jordan's voice got thicker. "What does that mean? That I'm always going to be guilty just for existing?" Patricia squeezed his hand tighter. "No, sweetheart. It means that some people carry poison in their hearts, and sometimes that poison spills out onto innocent people. What happened today wasn't about you. It was never about you. It was about her fears, her prejudices, her small view of the world. But it hurt me," Jordan said, and a tear finally escaped down his cheek. "It hurt me, and that's not fair." "No, it's not fair," Patricia agreed, her own eyes wet now. "And I'm not going to tell you it is. I'm not going to tell you to rise above it or turn the other cheek or any of those things people say when they want you to make your pain smaller and more convenient for them. What happened today was wrong. It hurt you, and you have every right to feel that hurt." Jordan wiped his eyes with his napkin. "Then why are we staying? Why didn't we just leave? Patricia smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. Because if we left, we'd be letting her win. We came here to have lunch together, and that's what we're going to do. We're not going to let her hatred take that away from us. We're not going to shrink ourselves or hide ourselves or apologize for existing. We're going to sit here, eat our food, and show the world that we belong wherever we choose to be. Chris brought their food a few minutes later. The chicken salad looked fresh and crisp, and Jordan's turkey club was stacked high with all the fixings. The chocolate milkshake was thick and rich, topped with whipped cream. "Enjoy your meal," Chris said. "And Jordan, I'm really sorry about earlier. You didn't deserve any of that." "Thanks," Jordan said, and he meant it. As they ate, Patricia told Jordan about her day in court. She'd presided over a case involving a man who'd stolen money from his own company. She talked about the law, about justice, about how the system was supposed to work even when it didn't always work perfectly. Jordan told her about his chemistry test, about the formula he kept getting wrong, about his friend Trevor who wanted to start a science club at school. They talked about normal things, parent and child sharing a meal, just like they'd planned to do before everything went sideways. Across the restaurant, Linda finally stood up to leave. She avoided looking at Patricia and Jordan, keeping her eyes down as she and Ashley made their way to the door. Just before they left, Ashley glanced back over her shoulder. The look on her face was complex. Shame, confusion, maybe the first stirrings of understanding that her mother wasn't always right. Other customers came up to their table as they finished eating. A young black woman stopped by to say how much she admired how Patricia had handled things. An older Hispanic man thanked them for staying and not letting ignorance win. A white couple with a young daughter told Jordan he was brave. Each interaction was brief but meaningful. Small moments of human connection that helped heal the wound that had been opened earlier. When they were finally done eating, Patricia left a generous tip for Chris and paid the bill at the counter. Robert tried to refuse her money, but she insisted. "We're customers," she reminded him. "That's all we ever wanted to be." As they walked to the door, Jordan turned back to look at the booth where he'd been sitting, studying his chemistry notes before his afternoon had turned into something else entirely. The booth looked ordinary now, just another seat in a restaurant. But he knew he'd never forget what happened there. Patricia put her arm around his shoulders as they stepped out into the sunshine. "You okay, baby?" Jordan thought about it for a moment. "Yeah, Mom, I think I am. Or I will be. That's all any of us can do," Patricia said. "Take it one day at a time and keep being who we are. The world doesn't always make it easy, but we don't have to make it easy for the world either." They walked to the car together, mother and son, their bond stronger for what they'd weathered together. Behind them, Riverside Diner continued its afternoon service, forever changed by what had happened within its walls. The videos started appearing online within hours. Someone had posted the footage from the restaurant with the caption, "Judge walks in on racist woman harassing her son." By the next morning, it had been viewed over 2 million times. By the afternoon, it was trending on every social media platform. Jordan woke up to hundreds of notifications on his phone. Friends from school were texting him, asking if he was okay. Strangers were commenting on the videos, some supportive, others saying things that made him wish he'd never looked. His mom had warned him about this the night before, told him that once something goes viral, it takes on a life of its own. But she'd also told him something else. "The story is already out there, baby. You can't control that. What you can control is how you move forward from here." At breakfast, Patricia showed Jordan the statement she'd drafted. She'd been up since 5 in the morning, carefully choosing her words. She read it aloud to him before posting it anywhere. "Yesterday, my son and I experienced something that too many families of color face regularly. Being made to feel unwelcome in a public space for no reason other than the color of our skin. I'm grateful to those who spoke up in that moment and to those who are speaking up now. But I want to be clear. This isn't about one woman's prejudice or one restaurant's failure. This is about a pattern of discrimination that persists in our society. We need to move beyond outrage and toward action. Teach your children to see people as people. Stand up when you witness injustice. Support businesses that value diversity and inclusion. And most importantly, don't let incidents like these become just another viral video that we watch, share, and forget. Real change requires sustained effort from all of us." Jordan listened carefully. "What do you want me to say?" "People keep asking me for my side of the story." Patricia set down her coffee. You don't owe anyone your pain, Jordan. You don't have to perform your trauma for people's entertainment or education. If you want to say something, say it because you want to, not because you feel obligated. Jordan thought about it while he ate his cereal. Finally, he picked up his phone and typed out a simple message. I'm okay. Thank you to everyone who reached out. Yesterday was hard, but I'm lucky to have a mom who taught me that my worth isn't determined by other people's ignorance. To anyone who's been through something similar, you're not alone and you matter. He showed it to his mother before posting it. She kissed the top of his head. Perfect. The media request came next. Local news stations wanted interviews. National morning shows called. A podcast about social justice reached out. Patricia declined them all on Jordan's behalf. She'd learned long ago that the media circus could be more traumatizing than the original incident. But she did agree to one thing. The restaurant owner, a man named Gregory Chen who lived 2 states away and had been traveling during the incident, called her personally. He was mortified by what had happened in his establishment and asked if he could meet with her and Jordan to apologize in person. Patricia agreed, but only on her terms. They would meet at the restaurant during business hours, so Jordan could see that the place wasn't going to be a source of fear for him going forward. That meeting happened 3 days later. Gregory was younger than Patricia had expected, maybe 40, with graying hair and tired eyes that suggested he'd been losing sleep. Robert, the manager, was there too, looking even more exhausted. I failed your son, Gregory said immediately, addressing both of them. And I failed everyone who trusts my establishment to be a safe, welcoming place. I've spent the last 3 days reviewing our policies, our training programs, and our entire approach to customer service. Robert has filled me in on everything, and I want you both to know that changes are already underway. He pulled out a folder and showed them the new policies he'd drafted: mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees, quarterly sessions on implicit bias, a clear protocol for handling discriminatory behavior from customers, and a zero-tolerance policy that would be posted prominently throughout the restaurant. I've also reached out to local civil rights organizations to help us do this right, Gregory continued. We're partnering with them to create training materials that will actually make a difference, not just check a box. Jordan had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now he spoke up.
What about the lady?
Linda, what happened to her? Gregory and Robert exchanged glances. Robert answered, She's been banned from all of our locations. We made it clear that her behavior violated everything we stand for and she's not welcome back. Her daughter reached out to me, Jordan said quietly. Ashley, she sent me a message on Instagram. She apologized. She said she was ashamed that she didn't speak up and that seeing the videos made her realize how wrong the whole thing was. Patricia looked at her son with surprise. You didn't tell me that. I just got it this morning. I haven't replied yet. I don't know what to say. Gregory leaned forward. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but if you do respond, whatever you decide to say is valid. After the meeting, as they walked through the restaurant, Jordan noticed the changes. There was a framed statement near the entrance about their commitment to dignity and respect for all customers. The staff seemed different too, more aware, more attentive in a genuine way rather than a performative one. Chris, the waiter, saw them and came over immediately. Jordan, hey, how are you doing? I'm good, Jordan said, and he was surprised to realize he meant it. I've been thinking about what happened a lot, Chris said. I'm in my 3rd year of college studying education. I want to be a teacher, and I keep thinking about what kind of teacher I want to be. The kind who speaks up or the kind who stays quiet. That day taught me something important, Jordan nodded. I'm glad something good came from it. Later that week, Jordan returned to school. He'd been dreading it, worried that everyone would treat him differently, that he'd become that kid from the viral video. And at first it was awkward. People stared. Some wanted to talk about it. Others didn't know what to say, so they said nothing at all. But his best friend Trevor pulled him aside at lunch. Dude, that was intense. Are you really okay? Jordan appreciated the directness. Yeah, I am. It sucked, but I'm dealing with it. Want to work on the science club proposal after school? We need to submit it by Friday if we want to get it approved for next semester. And just like that, life started feeling normal again. Not because the incident didn't matter, but because Jordan was more than what happened to him. He was still a student with homework to do, tests to study for, and dreams to chase. The science club got approved. Jordan AC'd his chemistry test. He and his mom went back to Riverside Diner the following month, sitting in their usual booth just like she'd said they would. It felt strange at first, but also empowering. They weren't going to let one terrible experience take away something they enjoyed. Chris served them again, and this time there was an ease to the interaction. He recommended the special, joked about the new dessert menu, treated them like what they were, regular customers who deserved good service. As the months passed, the viral videos faded from the internet's collective consciousness. New stories took their place. New outrages captured people's attention. But the impact of that day lingered in ways both big and small. Robert kept his promise about the training. Riverside Diner became known in the community as a place that took inclusion seriously. Other restaurants reached out, asking about their programs, wanting to implement similar policies. Ashley, Linda's daughter, continued to message Jordan occasionally. She'd started volunteering with a youth organization that worked on racial justice issues. She told him she was trying to be better, to unlearn the things she'd grown up seeing and hearing. Jordan appreciated her efforts even though he knew her journey wasn't his responsibility. Linda herself disappeared from public view. Some reports said she'd moved to another town. Others said she'd been fired from her job after the videos went viral. Jordan tried not to think about her too much. His mother had taught him that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. One evening, about 6 months after the incident, Jordan was studying in his room when his mother knocked on the door. She held an envelope in her hand. "This came for you," she said, handing it to him. Inside was a letter from Walter, the elderly man who'd spoken up in the restaurant. It was handwritten in shaky script. "Dear Jordan," it read, "I wanted you to know that what happened that day stuck with me. Dorothy and I have been married for 53 years, and we've seen a lot of change in this country, both good and bad. Young people like you give me hope that the arc really does bend toward justice, even when it doesn't feel like it. Keep being brilliant. Keep being brave. Keep being you. The world needs more Jordans in it. With admiration, Walter." Jordan showed the letter to his mother, and they both got a little teary. It was a reminder that even in the ugliest moments there was beauty to be found in human kindness. "You know what I learned from all this?" Jordan said, carefully folding the letter back into its envelope. "What's that, baby?" "That one bad experience doesn't define you. That standing up for yourself matters. That there are good people who'll stand with you when things get hard. And that sometimes the worst days can teach you the most important lessons." Patricia pulled her son into a hug. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," Jordan said, hugging her back. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow, Jordan would wake up and study for another test. He'd hang out with Trevor and work on their science club. He'd live his life, chase his dreams, and continue becoming the person he was meant to be. The incident at Riverside Diner would always be part of his story, but it wouldn't be the whole story. And that, Patricia had taught him, was the most important thing of all.